The uniforms, the atmosphere, the CBS broadcast, the game itself, the contrast of styles. This game had it all. This felt like an old school Rose Bowl between two big time programs and two big time teams. Absolute cinema on Saturday afternoon in Ann Arbor.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
What an emotional roller coaster of a football game. This was a game, right? When you look up the saying, styles make fights, contrast of styles, right? Whatever you want to throw out there, this is now what they're going to put in the dictionary. Alex Orji threw the ball just 12 times in this matchup. Miller Moss threw it 51. You couldn't ask for two separate styles of play clashing together. That's what the West Coast editions versus the traditional Big Ten really is all about, and it all came together when the Cardinal in gold and the Maize in blue came together in Ann Arbor at the Big House on Saturday afternoon. You know, really before I dive into my takeaways and the box score, and really as I start to break this one down, I want to talk about early in the football game, right? We all know Michigan was implementing their style of play, but I thought a big part was actually on special teams. Michigan was able to move the ball well enough early to get Tommy Doman to pin USC deep in the first quarter and into that second quarter as well, and that made it very difficult for USC, right? Because when Michigan wasn't scoring touchdowns with big explosive runs, more on that in just a little bit, in that first half, it was tough because this defense remained fresh, because the offense did their part staying on the field, moving the ball, moving the chains, even when they didn't get into the end zone. They were still able to move the ball fairly effectively, give the defense a little bit of rest, keep them fresh, so when USC started deep into their own territory, it was very difficult for them to move the football. And there were many other issues why it was difficult for USC to move the football in the first half and then parts of the second half as well. But that's one thing that really stood out to me that got USC kind of playing from behind a little bit and allowed Michigan to get ahead. And it was that lead early on in the football game, of course, that gave Michigan a little bit of a head start that they needed to come out on top in this particular football game. All right, let's get into my takeaways. Smash is back. Now, did it really go anywhere? Maybe just for a little bit. But man, when we talk about the smash that Michigan wants to play with, it all starts up front. Sharon Moore is a former offensive lineman. Sharon Moore came to Michigan, the offensive line coach for many years. That is his baby. That is his bread and his butter. All right? And this was the best performance of the year by the Michigan offensive line. I'll say this, I think in a couple of different ways, but specifically in the trenches, I think I might have been fooled a little bit by that LSU game that USC had and how they were able to hold their own in the trenches against the Tigers early on in the season. Like, LSU has a really good offensive line, but you've seen since then, you know, that game against South Carolina on this Saturday, they didn't play great. I know they pulled away late against UCLA, but for a lot of that game, right, that was a back and forth tight game between the Bruins and the Tigers. Maybe that first showing by USC might have me baited into a false sense of security of what they could do against Michigan. But also coming into this game, I wasn't overly impressed of what Michigan was doing on the offensive line. I thought they put it all together. They put it all together in this particular football game, right? Sharon Moore, I'm sure, came to these guys and said, hey, if you love run blocking, today's going to be your day, right? Because you're going to be able to get in there, get your nose dirty. If you want to push guys around, this is your opportunity. And I think what Michigan was able to do with their smash mentality, specifically up front, I know USC got better in the second half, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, but I think it still signals that USC has some room for improvement, certainly, up front. But this is as good of a rushing attack, really, that USC will probably face all season long. So I will say that as well. So the first part of Smash being back is how well that the offensive line certainly played today. Let's get back to the second big part of why Smash was back. And of course, it's the guys carrying the football. And they had 290 yards on the ground, the Michigan Wolverines did. And it was all about the explosive plays. It was all about the explosive runs. Okay, how about a 53-yard touchdown run for Kalel Mullings to put the touchdown on the board, 7-0. You had a 41-yard Donovan Edwards touchdown run. He has been known for explosive runs during his Michigan career. You had the Will Johnson pick 6, right? So we're notching up the touchdowns exactly how they were scored during this game. And then you had a 63-yard Kalel Mullings burst that set him up eventually for a 4th and goal touchdown plunge to give the Michigan Wolverines the lead. 3 runs combined for 157 of 290 of the Michigan total rushing yards. If USC is able to contain and limit even a couple of those big-time runs, they probably walk out of Michigan with the win. Now, why was Michigan able to get those big-time runs going early on during this game? You know, I'm going to go back to my childhood for a minute, right? When I used to go over to my grandma's house in northern Wisconsin on New Year's Eve. And, as a kid, I was all excited. I wanted to see the ball drop. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. That kind of thing. But she always used to tell me, patience. Patience is a virtue. And just like me being patient, waiting for that ball to drop on television, Michigan was patient. 1 yard here, 2 yards here. 3 yards there, 4 yards, right? They were able to methodically move the football. They didn't get knocked back a lot during this game. And eventually, they were patient enough, even when they were trailing in this game. And it's not like they had a better option throwing the football. I get that. But they were patient enough in this football game. They knew that if we keep churning, if we keep wearing down the USC Trojans, we're eventually going to break one. They broke one early. They broke another one early in the game. And they broke one when they needed it, when Kalel Mullings says, nothing is stopping me from getting on the other side of that M and getting deep into USC territory to be able to set up a touchdown. So the patience from Sharon Moore, the patience from Kirk Campbell, and the play calling when even they were behind. They knew what their strengths were. They believed in Smash. They believed in their identity, and it certainly worked out for them. Let's get to my second takeaway, and it really ties in to my last takeaway as well, so maybe I'll kind of cover these as one. But USC and those offensive line issues, Michigan just overloaded on them, especially in the first half. This offense wasn't able to get going, I mentioned earlier, because of the field position. But man, when Michigan is constantly in the face of Miller Moss, when Michigan is constantly knocking back this USC offensive line, it is very difficult to move the football in a Lincoln Riley type of offense. So Elijah Page is someone that USC is very high on. He's a young tackle, but he was getting eaten alive by Josiah Stewart and others coming off the edge, the blind side on Miller Moss. Now, you saw when the move was made, Elijah bench. Okay, we'll save you for a rainy day. You're on the bench for now. And then they moved Mason Murphy over to left tackle. They brought somebody else in at right tackle. Okay, now all of a sudden you see Miller Moss with a little bit more time back there in that pocket. All of a sudden, now you see him being able to hit those throws down the field to some of these weapons in this particular football game. And then when that happens, they're able to run the football a little bit better, right? It softens up the defense. Okay, this was the game plan that USC certainly wanted to ride with in this football game. And you saw where they were not able to do anything in the first half on the ground. They were able to do a lot more on the ground in the second half of this particular football game with Woody Marks. USC did lack a killer instinct, though. They had the ball, an opportunity to get it done. For as much as they maybe improved on the offensive line in the second half, and I think overall they went into the locker room at halftime, they realized what was happening, and I think they did a good job responding. There were good responses in this game for USC. There just weren't enough responses to make that one extra play. There weren't enough responses to have that killer instinct at the end of the game when they had the momentum with the lead to end up carrying it, putting more points on the board, and being able to get out of there with a touchdown. Like, especially right after that fumble, you got the ball, I think it was inside the 30, maybe inside the 20, late in the game, and all of that momentum, right, was going to USC. Michigan was not able to do anything. But even when they were better on the offensive line, Michigan still was able to get into the backfield and pressure Miller Moss when it mattered most. Let's talk about this Michigan defense. I mentioned it in my preview. Wink Martindale, all I hear about you is pressure, 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 pressure. And man, this defense was unleashed here today. This looked like the Michigan defense that we've seen over the past few years. This looked like the Michigan defense that everybody, including me, was talking about at the beginning of the year, that they could be one of the very best defenses in the entire country. How about Josiah Stewart? 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. You know, USC really didn't have an answer for him all afternoon long. I know, like I said, there was points and times early in the second half where they seemed to get things going, but even later in the game, he was disrupting things, making Miller Moss get a little bit off schedule, go a little bit quicker through his route combinations and looking down the field as the routes were developing down the field. 4 sacks as a team. How many hurries and pressures they got? Well, that's got to be certainly in the double digits. Wink Martindale and this defense got it going. And that was kind of the back end. It was kind of the back half of kind of the perfect game plan for Michigan, being able to do what they did, running the football, smash being back, and then on defense, being able to get after Miller Moss. This was the game plan. In the preseason, I talked about this being a bad matchup for USC. And like I said before, maybe I was kind of baited into a false sense of security of what USC did earlier in the season against LSU. But my feelings preseason were kind of validated in this particular football game. It was indeed a bad matchup up front for the USC Trojans. We got some crazy stats here. Michigan, 32 passing yards, 290 rushing yards in this specific football game. Like, if you're USC and you look at this thing from a defensive standpoint, which I think they certainly played better in the second half. They made some adjustments, right, coming up and playing the run a lot better, other than that 63-yard run. But like we said, explosive runs were the difference in this game. You needed to make the tackle. Even if Kalel Mullings got that big-time first down, you need to be able to make the tackle, right, so they don't keep moving the football down the field. And when Mullings was able to get, as far as he did down the field, it was going to be tough to stop him, right, in that goal-to-go type of situation there for the USC Trojans as well. I was really happy with the way Miller Moss responded throughout this game, right? He was getting hit early, and he was getting hit often, right? And a lot of times you can kind of go into your shell, and you can kind of see things, right, when you see the rush all the time. And then you're in your head, you can just go a little bit quicker and quicker, even when the rush isn't there. And then coming off of that Will Johnson, that bad decision, that Will Johnson pick six, I was impressed the way he got back onto the field, got USC in the lead. But we say it once, we're going to say it again. Lincoln Riley, Miller Moss, they didn't have that killer instinct to put the game away when they had all the momentum at that particular moment in time. And Kalel Mullings is quickly turning into one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. Right? 17 carries, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground for him running in this Michigan football game. I thought Michigan, one other point I want to make, I thought Michigan tackled really well in the open field today. That was the key for me in the preview. Has USC, hey, get rid of the football quickly, get it to your playmakers in space, and see if maybe you can break some of these tackles for some big gains. But I thought Michigan did a tremendous job in tackling this USC athletes in space when that certainly presented it as well. What a big-time win. A big-time win for the Michigan Wolverines. I think the mantra of the weekend, the talking point of the weekend, we saw Illinois beat Nebraska. Now we see Michigan beat USC. Man, the depth of this conference and the parity of this conference continues to be on display. I want to know what your thoughts are on Michigan's upset win over the USC Trojans. Do you think that Michigan can sustain this style of play, even against some of the better teams later in the schedule? And what do you think about the USC Trojans, right? Because a lot of people thought, hey, if they can beat Michigan, that's a statement to maybe put them into Big Ten championship game contendership. Where do you think the Trojans sit right now? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. What a Saturday. What a scene in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm Big Ten Ted. This is why we love college football. This is why we love this conference. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.